Hello. Welcome to today's webcast. My name is Carol Hollingsworth. I'm the JPS Vice President of Sales. With me today, as always, is Iggy Brigado, the JPS Senior Solutions Engineer. Iggy, how are you doing today?
I am doing well, Carol. How about you?
Doing fine, thank you. I look forward to this webcast because it's going to be a little bit different than some of the previous webcasts that we've done on the RSPZ2. With all the pending firmware upgrades, this is going to be an incredible product. It already has, in my opinion, numerous applications. There's so many applications, so many new features. It's hard to imagine where we're going to be with this after the next 2 quarters of firmware upgrades.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty amazing. I was kind of blown away with the new user interface features. So I think we should just go ahead and start talking about it. But really what I wanted to do, Carol, is kind of keep it simple. And so this is the system we're going to use today during the webcast. I've got my system here in California, and Carol's got his system. And so hopefully we'll be able to interact our systems together. And so a couple of the important parts and pieces of this particular demonstration will include the JPS RSPZ2, the dual channel gateways, and we're going to have 3 of them in the mix here. The list here shows all the resource interface capabilities of the RSPZ2 dual channel gateway, and on the right column are all the push-to-talk of a cellular services that we support, and you're going to see many changes in terms of the resources that we're going to be able to begin supporting. Another important part of our demonstration are a couple MCC4 consoles, and this is quite an extensive line of hardware-based consoles that include single-channel consoles, wall-mounted consoles with handsets. You see there's a 4-channel console also with a PTT handset, and we also have the higher capacity consoles like the MCC8, MCC12 that you see on the right. But really, to me, the main takeaway, these consoles are hardware-based. There's no dependency on servers or connectivity to a computer or even connectivity to the internet. They all interact by themselves autonomously with our gateways and controllers. So trying to reduce those single points of failures, and I think this is a great philosophy in terms of not having that type of dependency on computers or servers. And lastly, we're going to also include, obviously, the Z-Series controller, and really the best definition of the controller is it is a management hub and a wide area system builder, and it actually just does that. We can build very complex systems. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to show you some more complex systems as opposed to our system that Carol and I are using, which is pretty simple. What's also remarkable about the Z-Series controller, it can support 160 of those RSPZ2s that you saw earlier. You know, in our 3 RSPZ2 gateway systems, pretty simple, but can you imagine supporting 160 of those RSPZ2 gateways? You're talking close to, 650 or so resources controlled in a single wide area system. The controller does not have any physical interfaces like 4-wire or LMR interfaces. It's all digital, but once we commission the controller to work in a wide area system, we can then incorporate remote gateways that do support 4-wire devices. And all in all, everything is unified in a single distributed system using what we call JPS Unity, which is not a protocol, but it is a feature set that allows easy federation of gateways and consoles and other JPS devices and gateways into a wide area system. Again, I like calling this centralized management. We can create what we call talk paths, which in our previous webcast, I kind of described those as RoIP audio trunks, where it allows us to simply provision a single trunk that may contain 4, 5, 6 different RoIP elements traveling through a single talk path trunk and associated to a controller or other gateway. So this allows us really very easy provisioning of wide area systems. Yeah, one thing before we get started, Carol, I just wanted to mention that the version 4.4 is available directly from the JPS website. Go to the support link. As usual, you can download the firmware at no charge, and that's available for all your Z-Series products for the life of that product. So I encourage everybody to download the firmware, again, free of charge from the website. And
They need to get that done, including if they're if they really have an older version, they need to take care of the later versions before they get to the 4.4. So that's important to keep those updated.
One thing I also wanted to mention is, for the most part, the firmware features that we're going to show you here relative to the user interface is available on not only the RSPZ2, but the Z-Series controller. There is one feature that is not available in the RSPZ2, and that's the ability to create resource groupings, and we'll talk about that when the time comes. One thing I want to first start off is looking at the user interface running 4.0 in sort of a classic type of configuration. Okay, Carol, this is the user interface to one of our RSPZ2s. This happens to be one of the RSPZ2s in California. And you might already notice we're running 4.4. As you can see that on the bottom right-hand corner. And you might notice something that's a little bit different here, and those are the resource tiles or resources depicted on the left-hand column, which is under the local folder or grouping, and the look is a little bit different. But that is kind of the classic expectation of our vertical format of the resource tiles. And one thing you'll also notice, I am running in the custom configuration. As you remember from our previous webcast, we talk about the net configurations where we can have a simple cross-connect with a backhaul, independent pass-through. In terms of a wide area distributed system, we want to run in this custom configuration where we can create different specific and consolidated nets, and it gives us a lot more versatility and also allows this subordinate gateway to be joined to a wide area system using JPS Unity, which we'll also talk a little bit later. But one of the things I just wanted to show you is the typical configuration of an RSPZ2 running 4.4 with these unique looking icons, which hopefully you're not used to, because that's the 4.0. This, conversely, is the controller. I'm also running 4.4. The tiles look different, and this is where I can change the look and the configuration of those tiles. I'm going to go ahead and remain in this vertical resource shape configuration for now. I'm going to actually transition to a different look a little bit later, but I'm going to go ahead and add some of these resources to a net. And one thing that we remember we could do is I could take these resources and just drag them into a net. Drag and drop. It's pretty simple. I can take a console here, drag and drop. And as you know, under these local resources, this little grouping, those are all the digital protocols that are being hosted by the controller itself. I even have a SIP connection. Let me bring that into the mix here as well, and grab maybe an RoIP resource. Again, these tiles might be foreign to you because these are the new look of the icons within those tiles. And this also allows me to rename these nets. So let me go ahead and edit the name. And this is something we've already been able to do. Simple name. Incidentally, those names are persistent in the header of the nets. If I power down the controller and power that controller back up, you're going to see exactly this. The net will be reestablished, as well as the naming convention within that net. All right, so once again, we're in the controller, and as you can see on the left-hand side, we do have our local resources. Again, those can include JPS RoIP, JPS Bridge, JPS MCC console resources, as well as SIP and RTP. On the bottom in the resource panel are our distributed resources, and those include the subordinate RSPZ2s, the remote RSPZ2s. We have two rows here which represent the two RSPZ2s here in California, and this is the RSPZ2 and the resources being supported by the RSPZ2 that's in Oklahoma with Carol. And so this allows us to move these resources around. But what I wanted to do is show you the first new feature in 4.4, firmware build, and you'll notice that there's a new menu in the header, and that's called Preferences. So let me open that up. And again, this allows us to do a lot of customization on the user interface side. One of the things we can change is the resource shape, and I'm currently set the vertical. I kind of like calling that the classic portrait shape of the resource tiles that you can see not only in the net but on the resources on the left. But we can select large or medium formats, which are in a landscape version. Nice horizontal tile, and what that allows us to do is a lot of things. We can embed dialog or menus within the tile. We can also add longer naming conventions for those tiles to help us identify what that resource is actually supporting. We do have a medium format as well as a large format. So depending on what you want to do, you can toggle back and forth at any time. And so what's interesting about setting up these user interfaces, they're pretty much custom. So if Carol, for instance, if you want to log into the system using your own login attributes, password, username, for instance, and your roles, your screen will be totally different than my screen. You have different colors, different shapes. You might still want to implement the vertical format, resource format, whereas another user might like this landscape type of resource format. But we're going to stay here because there's so much more advantage to this type of format. A couple of the changes again that we made, and some of the advantages of this format is we can add extra text to identify that resource. In the past, I believe we were limited to only 8 characters in the title. We can go up as high as 25. I actually counted that the other day. Wow. And so depending on the format, you can go up to 25 characters, which helps us identify that resource. But one thing that you might notice a new change, and I'm kind of happy to see this after almost 25 years of using PTT and Core as a designator in our user interfaces, we've moved away from that. So if you go and look closely at the tile, we now indicate Core as RX and PTT as TX, which makes more sense to some of those who do not and might not understand what a carrier operated relay is. So I've got my little conventional radio here, VHF radio. So I'm going to go ahead and key that, and you can see the control signaling going back and forth. It's in an RX state, meaning my donor radio is receiving, and you can see a console. The maroon tile in the center is then keying. That's what you're going to see in this new format. If you go back to the RSPZ2, I'm still in that vertical format. If I key, we're still going to use that COR and PTT control designation in this vertical format only. I also have a preference. If I want to change that in my RSPZ2, I can also change that format as well. And now I've got that RX and TX designation. And also I have that ability to add extra text in the resource tile as well. So I'm back at my controller. Yeah, and Carol, one thing that I think we're really good at is in terms of JPS listening to customers is adding features that are usually not expected. And one of the things they added, which I think is really great, I think I complained about that a little bit myself, so I'm proud of that, but is the ability to understand devices that are in a transmit state or a receive state, or that were in a transmit state or a receive state. And for instance, if I'm an operator, I've got a lot of things going on my computer workstation, and I hear communications coming in on my console. I might want to glance over to my controller user interface that we're looking at here, and I want to see what just happened, what just occurred. I heard some audio coming out of a console, and I glance over at my controller, and I don't get really any indication that there was activity. And so there's ways of determining where that audio came from, but what the developers had done is add an ability to create dwell time or allow the control signaling indicators to linger, so to speak. So let me key my radio here. If I release my PTT, they immediately go away. So under preferences, and this is still user specific. So if you log in as a different user, you're going to get a different behavior in your own controller. And we have this little feature called RxTX Linger, and it allows that control signaling to dwell a little bit longer after activity is terminated for up to 6 seconds. Sometimes my controller is buried under a bunch of applications and I have to dig for that app, and lo and behold, with this feature, I can see, as you can see here on the screen, that when I release my PTT, you can see that the control signal designations kind of dwell for a moment. So this gives me a fighting chance to get in there and say, okay, I can see where that transmission was coming from. In this case, was that VHF asset. Let me key again, release my PTT. You can see that indicator come a little bit faint, but it's also lingering a little bit more. Another advantage of this large resource format tile is the ability to embed menus or dialogue into the tile itself. And you can see a little caret down here, Carol, that when you click on it, reveals some more information. And there's 3 tabs, gives you a kind of an overview of what's taking place in terms of that particular resource. This happens to be a 4-wire or a radio resource. It's in a normal state. It's supporting my conventional radio system here in San Jose. It is a remote RSPZ2. It also reveals some of the activity taking place in terms of transmit and receive. So forensically, I can go back and see when that activity has taken place. There's also a DTMF function, and this allows us to inject DTMF characters into that resource, and only that resource. So if I'm, as you can see, I'm in an interoperable net with other resources. If I choose to send DTMF, I can go ahead and do that. Let me enter a value here.
Okay.
Yeah, Carol.
Okay. You answered my question. The characters are digits.
Yeah,
right?
they're digits. You can,
Right.
but you can also control the volume and the duration. And again, I'm going to inject it. You can probably hear it from my radio here. That's coming out of my land mobile radio. And as you can see by the control signaling, got that little linger there going on, that none of the other resources heard that. So that's pretty critical. I don't want to deliver that information haphazardly to these other resources that have that are not useful to those other resources. The other things we can do in the little dialog menu embedded in that resource is also look at grouping. I'm going to talk about grouping in a more focused conversation, but you can access the grouping feature right from the tile itself, and I'm going to show you how that's convenient. I do have a SIP connection in my interoperable net, my SCCOM Northwest net. I've got my name up here. If I look at the dialog, have the same tabs. I've got the information tab, DTMF, the group resource grouping tab as well, but I also have a call history. And earlier this morning, I did call into my system from my cell phone, and you can see that information. The information from that last call, it was me calling in from my mobile phone. This is the phone number I called from. It also talks about the duration of the call, when that call came in. So a lot more information than we used to reveal in the past. Yeah, Carol, one thing you might notice are lots of colors. I believe in I don't even remember what 4.3 looked like, because I'm just now really focused on 4.4 and moving into this new user interface. But there's a lot of colors here. But again, all these colors are customizable, and you can create your own user interface in terms of what you want colors to look like, icons you want embedded in each of these tiles. So let me go ahead and right click on my resource, and this happens to be my conventional LMR resource, and the menu looks different. I'll talk about that in a moment. But if I click on settings, it takes me directly to that resource. And as you know, if I click on any of these resources or tiles in my resource panel, it's going to focus on that particular resource. Let me go back to my
this new feature is absolutely awesome. Adding all the colors, the ability to change the colors, it really has made a huge difference in working with the RSPZ2.
Yeah, again, especially if you're working with lots of resources like I'll show you here in a moment from our rep demo system, our sales system, which has, I think, 11 or 12 RSPZ2s, all the resources look the same. So it's very, very difficult to really kind of pick out what's a push-to-talk of a seller resource. Conversely, it's difficult to pick out a SIP connection over a 4-wire interface. So
right.
The customization of colors I think is really a nice breakthrough. And so there is a default configuration, as you can see. I'm going to zoom in here and take a look, but under this customization panel is where you can customize and create all these different looks and colors, and you can always reset back to the default accent colors or what have you. Just to save time, I want to show you what these tiles look like, but these are our classic tiles, and very recognizable for those that are using our Z series products. These are also PTT, push-to-talk of a cellular resource icons. Again, that is going to grow as we start adding other services from other third parties into our embedded push-to-talk over cellular capabilities into our Z series product line. But these are the new resource tiles. They're a little bit different. I kind of like the 4-wire or LMR representations You can customize any of these resources to depict these icons embedded. And we also have dual color tiles, thin line tiles, monochrome tiles. So again, you can customize these based upon your user login to suit your particular needs. And I believe there's going to be more tiles coming into the future. Okay, Carol. Yeah, I want to get back to the home screen here. This is my controller, but I want to kind of briefly speak about the net that we created here. We've got 4 resources in that net. Rename that net SCCOM Northwest. A couple of features I just wanted to talk about. Not only can we rename that net, but there's a few things we can do, like obviously edit the name. We do have a record function where we can stream outbound RTP or SIP to a voice logging recorder. One thing we can also do is inject a 1 kilohertz tone, and this is not a reference tone. This is, I guess it would be a line proving tone, just to see if I can get audio over, in some cases, my TalkPath trunk or my RoIP link. And I'm going to go ahead and click that. And I just want you to hear, because I do have my land mobile radio here, and I do have my resource in that net. I'm going to click 1 kilohertz tone, and you should be able to hear that. Sorry about that. But as you notice, all that information is being sent to all the resources in that net. So don't encourage you to leave that on, but again, that's a great way of testing not only the link, the RoIP link or the TalkPath link between these gateways, but also the receiving device on the far end, see if they can hear that tone. So really nice, thoughtful tools that have been added into that net. And I believe in a subsequent build, there's going to be some more features added into the net. For instance, we can lock that net, which is I think is a great feature. All right, Carol, I'm going to create some nets here. You know, this is all about wide area distributed communications and creating these isolated nets. And as we did in the past, remember, we can take any of these resources, and in this distributed system, I can drag a resource into a net. Let me take one of your consoles there, Carol, drag it into a net. I can also, if I choose to, I can rename that net. I am going to rename that net. So we got 2 disparate nets. And again, if you log into this system, Carol, you're going to see exactly this. All right, so that's actually a good point, because I'm going to show you where we can create nets that are specific to my needs. But you saw me dragging and dropping. But one thing the developers added into this new firmware build is the ability to right-click. And as you saw earlier, if I right-click on a particular resource tile, there's our traditional settings as well. It takes us right to our resource settings menu. But it also allows me to navigate or move or push that resource into different nets, dispatch, even a monitoring nets. And if I select Add to Net, this now allows me to move that resource into a new net or slide that right into an existing net, as opposed to dragging and dropping. So if I have a large system, let me go ahead and add this into my Southwest net. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And you can see that push-to-talk of a cellular resource jumped into that net. And why is that important? Because if I look at a system that you and I use quite often, Carol, is our rep demo system. And this is actually still a relatively small system. It has 11 or 12 RSPZ2s. I believe there's 15 consoles. But can you imagine selecting a tile and having to drag it all the way across this landscape and drop it into a net? You know, it could be quite difficult. And so the fact that we can now right-click on a tile and add it to a net is pretty interesting. So I can go ahead and let me add this into my Northwest net.
That makes it so much easier to use and navigate through. It makes everything about what we're doing here, or what the user's doing, a lot easier.
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, it makes it so much easier. I can definitively look at a list of nets and then select that net, as opposed to, well, let me see, I think I'm going to drag it into this net, and I might not drag it. I might release my mouse and drag it into another net. So this helps me reliably place that into a proper net. I can also, let me grab a console here. I'm going to go ahead and right-click a console. This is an MCC resource. And I can also add it into a monitoring group, and it says new monitoring group, and it added it to the monitoring group. Let me expand that, and there it is. It is now a destination in a monitoring group. And so let me take a resource that's already in an existing net, drag it into a net. Now I have a source, and you can see that with the single-ended arrow delivering radio communications to my console in an unselect fashion. If I key the console, I'm not going to interfere with communications coming from this example of P25 resource. Alternatively, I can right-click on the tile, and I can add to the monitoring group. Remember, I can also rename that monitoring group. I'm going to slide that into monitoring group number 1. I'm just going to go ahead and right-click that. Go ahead to my my Southwest net. Going to go right-click. I'm going to select monitoring group number 1, and I'm moving resources in and out of these monitoring groups without having to drag and drop.
That's
I can
very
do
nice. That's
yeah,
very nice.
I like that. And so one thing I can do is add resources into my dispatch net. And you might notice that you don't see a dispatch net in this particular user interface, and that's because I have actually disabled that under preferences. And if I open up preferences again, I have the ability to show or hide my dispatch area or my dispatch net. I think that's pretty significant because if I want to declutter my user interface and I have no need to engage in any dispatch activity, I might want to just go ahead and hide that feature. But I'm going to go ahead and reveal that. Okay, Carol, now that we got our dispatch net or a dispatch panel enabled, and I'm going to go ahead and add in this case, an MCC8, a PTT channel from MCC8. I have the ability to, as usual, drag it into the dispatch net. I could right-click, then go ahead and add resources into that net, like we've done in the past, drag and drop, or, again, I can go ahead and add to dispatch. Go ahead and do that right-click. And again, if I have a large system, this is probably a safer way of moving resources into these nets. Let me take a little bridge RoIP links into that dispatch. And one thing you might notice is, we've talked about this in previous webcasts, there is a single-ended arrow on the resource that is the source to dispatch. And if I key that, in this case my VHF radio, that information is only going in one direction. Let me go ahead and I want to move your console into the net, Carol. Let me unassign the dispatcher. And this happens to be a console, Carol. I'm going to assign it as a dispatcher. All right, so I moved it into net. I might have you go and depress your button 2 on your console in a minute, but let me just show you that when I key my VHF asset, I can talk to your console. I can hear it on your side there, Carol. And you notice by the control signaling, there's also Linger here. I'm not interfering with the other resources in my dispatch net. But Carol, if you can depress your button number 2 on your console.
Radio test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, you notice that I can't hear your information coming out of my conventional radio because of that one-way arrow signifies we have unselect audio. If I click on that single-ended arrow, we see double arrows, meaning I got duplex communications. I can do that to other resources as well. I can keep some unselect, but go ahead and key, Carol. Let me talk to you again. Test 1, 2. Now you should be able to reply back to me, Carol.
Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There we go. Yeah. So, again, a lot more conveniences. I like that Linger. I can see that transmit and receive activity dwelling a little bit, that control signaling to tell me that there is some activity. And if I need to, I can click on the little embedded dialog, and I can see the activity that just took place between yourself, Carol, and myself. Even your console, I can check the activity from your console.
The lingering setting makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does for me too, because I don't usually have my console in front of me, and I don't have my user interface focused like we have here. Yeah, Carol, one thing I wanted to also show you is I've actually logged into the same controller twice. So I've logged in as the master admin, so I can do a lot of things. You know, I can create users, delete users, change their roles, basically have full reign of the entire system. But I did create a restricted user, and this is my other tab. So this is the instance of the restricted user. Let me go ahead and log in. And this is a completely different user. And one thing you might notice is everything kind of looks the same. But one thing you might notice is the dispatch panel on the top. The dispatch panel is different than my dispatch panel. So if I jump back to my system, my login, you're going to notice that my dispatch panel is different. Assigned dispatcher, which is your console there in Oklahoma. This is the system. The other user, their dispatch panel is completely different. Even if I change colors or tile formats as one user, the other user is not going to be affected by that. They can customize their user interface as they like.
Understand. That's excellent.
And Carol, another really cool feature that they added is the ability to create resource groupings. I like calling them folders. You can call them whatever you want, but this is a way we can consolidate our resources at the left and then consolidate those into personalized groups or global groups to help us organize our resources. So if I have a very large system, or maybe I'm an agency that's hosting other agencies on their controller, I can create these little resource groups that can differentiate the different agencies or different disciplines within our agency.
Is there a limit to the number of resource groups?
Oh, that's a good question, Carol. I don't believe there is. In fact, the way I'm set up here is I have about 101 resource groups capability.
Wow.
So those are a lot of groups. Yeah. So one of the features that you might notice is new, particularly in the resource column on the left, is this eyeball that allows us to hide or reveal my resource groups. And I've already created one resource group, but the default resource groups at the controller level are the local resources, which are the RoIP or the digital resources that are hosted by the controller. There's no 4-wire interfaces on the controller, if you remember. The distributed resources are all of my RSPZ2s or ACUZ1s. And so now I can collapse these groups. I actually created a resource group of my own, which I called my TAC group. But let me go over to my RSPZ2 just to show you what that looks like. And there is no way of creating customized groups at the RSPZ2 level because there's not a lot of resources anyway. You're going to have a maximum of 4. If you add the USB headset, that's the 5th. And you're going to have some RTP resources as well. But there are no resources, customized resource groups that you can create at the RSPZ2 level. So I just kind of wanted to get that out of the way. But if I go back to my controller, particularly if I go back to my rep demo system, there's a lot of resources. So there's a good opportunity to create folders here with respect to, in this case, our manufacturer reps. But if I go back to the system that we're using, Carol, I'm going to go ahead and show you what my resource net looks like that I created, and this happens to be a personal net, and I have resources in that net. As you can see, because some of them are ghosted out, that means that resource is actually being used in a monitoring net or a interoperable domain on the right. Again, I can customize these by clicking on the little edit button here, and I can do such things as reorder my resource group or folder in my stack of other folders. So if I have an important folder, I want to move that to the top, I have that opportunity to do that. I can rename that group. I can delete or save that group. This gives me an opportunity when I'm in this edit mode to reveal this resource drop zone. Now this allows me to take resources, either local or distributed, and drop those into that resource drop zone, and I can add that into my personal group. I can go ahead and click save, and now I have all those resources that I am responsible for in my personal group. And again, because this is a personal group, and you can see by the silhouette of a single person, this is only my group. If you log in with your attributes, Carol, you're not going to see that group. So really a really nice feature. So nice. If I want to, I can add a group, and I went ahead and clicked on the plus sign on my resource column, and this now gives me the opportunity to select a personal group or a global group. Let me create a group here. Name this a Super Bowl event. This is going to be probably something temporary. And if I want to edit that group and add resources, because there are no resources in that group, I can then reveal the drop zone. I can move resources into that group by dragging and dropping. Or better yet, let me go ahead and save that.
You may want to save that, Iggy. I'm not sure that you're aware of it or not, but we will have RSPZ2 gateways at the Super Bowl.
Oh, I'm not aware of that.
Yes.
Okay.
We have a customer that is providing communications of one type or another, and he will have, I believe, 10 RSPZ2s at the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised because that's happened at many Super Bowls in the past. So this is just a coincidence. But so you might, in this instance, you might want to create your a specific group for that event. And once that event's concluded, I can click on my little edit button. I can delete that group and then move on. All right. So let me go ahead and cancel that. If I open this up, I'm going to collapse all my groups. But if I open up my Super Bowl events, I only have one resource. I'm going to use the embedded dialog to move a resource into that net. In this example, a DMR asset, I'm going to go ahead and click on the menu, the embedded menu. And if I go to my grouping tab, I now have the ability to select whether this is going to be a personal group or a global group. I have not established a global group. I've got a couple personal groups that are available to me, and we can see that with the green plus sign. I want to add this DMR resource to my Super Bowl event. I'm going to click on that, and if we can see on the top, my Super Bowl event now includes that DMR device. Let me add a push-to-talk over cellular resource into that group as well. Go to personal groups, and also from this dialog I can actually create my own group directly from that tile. So if I'm in the middle of a mission and I see I need to add my push to talk of a cellular resource that's into a group, I can create a personal or a global group directly from that resource. So great, really a good opportunity to create a more organized user interface by creating these groups, so to speak.
I like it. That's very good.
Yeah. So let me talk about one more thing in terms of grouping our resources. I love this organization, especially when we're going to start dealing with these awesome large systems. I can go ahead and collapse my groups as well. I want to create a global group. One thing I can do is go ahead and create the new group from the column here, select global group, and you can tell by the icon on the upper left is 3 silhouettes that defines this as a group, and I might want to call this, maybe an interagency group. I want to make this global, so every user that logs into this system, they will have access to this group I'm going to create here in a moment. Click edit again. I want to add resources into that group. I can actually take other resources that have already been placed in groups, and I'm going to go directly to the resource tile in an interoperable net. I'm going to select my global resource group, add it to that interagency group that I created earlier. I'm going to go to a...
That is an excellent, that's excellent. That's huge over dragging and dropping.
I can do that anywhere. So, if I have a mission taking place, and I have there's a pursuit happening between jurisdictions, I might have an interoperable group set up or a monitoring group, as you see here, and I don't want to disrupt that, but I do want to go ahead and create my interagency group or add to it at any time. Well, that has already been added, but let me add your console in here. Console there, Carol, into that group, and so on and so forth. Just add resources, and you can then remove those resources as you like. Go ahead and click save, and everything's all there. Let me collapse my groups. Now I got different folders, and if I want to move my Super Bowl event down the list, and I can actually change my display order. Let me make it 103. Go ahead, save that. And now you see my Super Bowl event got pushed all the way down to the bottom. But again, if I log in as a different user, I'm not going to see this personal TAC channel or the personal Super Bowl event. I, as a different user, might want to log in there and create my own.
Right.
Okay, Carol, another new feature that they added, it's really not a new feature, but they've actually added new features within that feature, and that's what we call our Unity status. And if you've noticed at the bottom of our controller user interface, there is a little green icon, and that's really everything in terms of setting up a wide area system based upon Unity. And again, Unity, check our previous webcast when we talked about Unity, wide area system builder, and our management hub. The Unity status tells me everything about my system in terms of remote resources that are associated with my system. So if I click on that and it's green, that tells me that all my systems are online, as you can see here. And I can also show all my systems. So remember this, we have a very simple system here for our presentation.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's very nice.
At a glance, I can see that all my remote RSPZ2s that are scattered throughout the United States in this example are online. If I look at my RSPZ2, let me toggle to my RSPZ2, it also has a like Unity status indicator. Let me click on it. It says it's online. So it's pretty simple in terms of, so that's key. If I see that indicator is yellow, that means I might have a network issue where the gateway is not associating to the controller. And so that tells me as an operator or a technician or an engineer that, hey, I got an issue here. I am not linked to my controller. The nice thing about this architecture is if I'm not linked to my controller and I got a yellow Unity status down at the bottom, I can still operate this gateway locally. I'm not subordinate completely or dependent on that controller. It's also nice to have the controller in place, but the fact that I lost my network link, and as an example, I can still control this RSPZ2 locally if I have to. And that's a big deal. So going back to our controller, there's all our good information there at a glance. A good example of this, I brought up our large rep demo system. There's a dozen RSPZ2s and probably 15 consoles. And the Unity status, as you can see on the bottom here, is yellow. It's not a good thing. Green is always good. It then reveals all these systems, these remote RSPZ2s that are not associated. And in fact, that's the case. The systems are probably turned off or not associated to the network. So this, at a glance, reveals the status of my wide area system. I can click on Show All Systems, and it also reveals some of the online systems that we have. But this is really kind of a subset, a quick glance. For all intents and purposes, if I was more interested in what my resources or distributed systems or remote systems are doing, I'd go to the settings menu and then go to distributed systems. And all my systems in my particular architecture has been revealed in a little bit more detail. I still have the online and offline status, but this also allows me to click on any of these elements and provision certain aspects of
that is excellent.
Of that
that
resource.
Is absolutely excellent.
It is, yeah. So
a lot of information,
I like
just
that.
Easy to read, very easy.
So, yep, exactly. If you want to dig deep and bury yourself in data, you can do that through this menu. Or
Right.
if you want to do it at a glance, you have this Unity status button down at the bottom.
That's huge.
It is, Carol.
Again, just go to the Unity status button, right?
Exactly.
That's cool. Yeah.
You want green. That's the key.
Right.
But in the past, sometimes you would see the green, but there might be some systems that aren't functioning. So you're sort of being fooled that the system is not completely functioning. So in any case, if there's one system that's not functioning, it's gonna throw a yellow Unity status down at the bottom, and that'll force you to kind of investigate and determine what's going on with your system.
Excellent.
Yeah. And so one thing, let me look at some settings here real quickly. I think we're going to wrap this up here, but I went ahead and right-click. Remember, I like right-clicking a lot now. I'm going to right-click on my MCC console settings. And one thing I wanted to briefly talk about, we've actually added encryption to a couple of the JPS MCC consoles, particularly the MCC 8 and MCC 12. Now we can instate AES 256 encryption into those consoles. We can't do it on the lower capacity consoles because of horsepower of the processors, but in the larger capacity MCC 8 and MCC 12, you can create an encrypted RoIP link to those devices if necessary.
That's a good addition to the MCC consoles.
All right, so since we're in the setting screens, a couple things I wanted to look at, and I'm going to look at some of my local resources here. There's a tile here, which is an RoIP resource. So I clicked on it, and now I focus its settings within my setting screen. The developers added is the ability to use DNS lookup or a fully qualified domain name. And so as you can see, typically what you would enter is an IP address and a port to allow the RTP to flow, but we can also enter a domain name as well. So just a minor change, but easy to provision interface. I think that's really important for the folks or the engineers or technicians that are setting up this system. One last thing I wanted to talk about, there are a couple things I kind of wanted to clear up. There's a reboot function on the bottom, which essentially does a hard reboot on the hardware itself. We can do that on the gateway, the RSPZ2 as well. And we can do that on the controller, which we're looking at here. But there is a reset feature underneath the administrative menu. And this now allows us in much more granularity to reset only certain aspects of the controller in this case, or the RSPZ2. For instance, if I don't want to reset the network settings of that device, which might place that device in isolation, I'm not going to check that box. So if I want to reset my resources or my nets or my resource groups, for instance, just small aspects of my system, I have that capability, as opposed to resetting the entire system, which would force me to reconfigure the system. And also don't forget that you can back up these configurations and restore those configurations.
That's a huge time saver.
It really
Absolutely.
is. It really is, and I think that's going to lead to other really cool things in the future. What the developers do, they create a feature that's pretty compelling. But what I think they're doing is setting everybody up to add more features on top of those features in the future. Yes. And so I'm going to wrap this thing up. But one thing I don't think a lot of our customers know about is under the help menu, there's a lot of really good information, user manuals, that audio optimization guide. You can download those as a PDF directly, all kinds of things you can do. And I think in a subsequent webcast, we're going to talk about some of the diagnostics and, in this case, network validation we can do in the system. But one thing I encourage customers to do is take a look at this product tour. Yeah, and this is a product tour. You can download this, or you can view this right on your desktop in a browser, and this will show you everything I talked about today that you and I, Carol, talked about. But
that's good. Thank you.
Really, kind of at a glance. I mean, this is great. You can share with your allied agencies and say, "Hey, this is what I'm doing." Kind of show off what you got again at a glance, and yeah, update those systems. Carol, we keep talking about. It seems like every time we have a webcast, we're talking about updating. And encourage that. 100%.
A lot of new additions that really change the RSPZ2 into an already incredible product. But it's getting easier to use. It has more features, a lot more features, and certainly more capabilities.
Yeah. So this is great. Developers blindsided us with 4.4. They're going to blindside us again in a couple of months with something that's going to be completely probably mind-blowing. So I kind of can't wait for that. But we're adding more reliability, more convenience, adding more stability every time. Looking forward to these. And I think that's enough for today, Carol. We're obviously going to be back to talk about these the next features, and hopefully we'll have a webcast coming up here.
Excellent presentation. So informative. Thank you, Iggy.
You bet, Carol.